My name is Andy Howard. I'm founder of Howard & Associates, which is a consulting firm which helps organizations deploy video, both video streaming and video conferencing, on their networks. I worked for a long time for VBerg Systems, which is exhibitor here at the show, and also worked prior to that with Cashflow back in the late 90s, implemented the first streaming media caching appliance. So I've been in the industry for a long time and seen a lot of changes with this show and just trends in the industry in general. So we have a great panel today. Down at the end we have David Birnbaum from Caldwell Banker, Vice President of Learning. We've got Mark Sherwood from Cisco, Senior Director of the IT, Emerging Technologies IT. We've got Sid Isbell from WellPoint, who's a video solutions architect there, basically in charge of driving all the video solutions for WellPoint, which is one of the largest health providers in the U.S. And Mike Newman, who's a VP and General Manager of the Video Content Management division at Polycom, which came out of the acquisition of Accordant, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So the agenda today, there's a lot to cover. This is let me first ask, how many of you are getting pushed by your organizations to deploy mobile video solutions? So pretty much everybody. It's a trend that we've seen across the board. I mean, once Apple introduced the iPad and the video capabilities that has, it was a market shift where people are saying, my executives are saying, I need to get video onto this device. You know, I want to use this device as a productivity tool. So with that comes a lot of different challenges. So we're going to talk about some of the trends in the industry, some of the applications and what these folks have done in their organizations to deploy video, some of the challenges that come along with that in terms of deployment and networking. Talk about some of the future things that are supposed to be coming, with Microsoft, with their new Windows operating system, HTML5. And then also talk about how you manage all this content, both within the enterprise as well as in the cloud. So just real quickly, a couple trends. In 2011 was the first year that more smartphones and tablets shipped than PCs. And I think this is a trend that's going to continue. I don't think PCs and Macs are ever going to go away. I think they serve their own purpose, but you're seeing more and more mobile devices and people wanting to use those for business use. And really the speed of adoption is increasing. So if you look at how fast the iPad gained market traction, it's really amazing to think back. It's only been 2 years that device has actually been on the market. And if you think about pretty much, I'm sure half the people in the room have one of those devices now. And again, industries are pushing to have that be used as a business tool. So, one of the big things that does, I think Sid would probably be able to talk about this quite a bit, is these devices don't have a hardwired connection anymore. So you have to really think about, well, how is the video, which has a heavy payload, going to get to that device? Are you going to use your wireless network? Are you going to use a 3G, 4G? What are the bandwidth? What's the bandwidth that's associated with that? And then video on these devices is really the biggest application, and it's supposed to grow 100% per year until 2015. So, and then again, you have to think about how, when you're streaming video to these devices, how is it actually going to get to the device? Is it going to go over the internal Wi-Fi network, or are you going to go out onto the public cellular network? And there's really, you have to think about how that content's going to get to that device. So if you're going to go over the cellular network, you're probably going to have to use a CDN, versus if you're going to go over your internal Wi-Fi, you're going to have to build the capabilities into your network to support that. All right, so let's get right into the applications, and I'm going to have the panelists really talk about their specific implementations. But first of all, what's the thought from the crowd? Do people think that these mobile devices are really a technology shift, or is it just a fad? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. It's just taken off. Go ahead.
Although I have people in my management that say it's bad.
In your management?
And in the network, there are people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
they're
just
wrong.
the way that people are using these devices, and again, if you think about the iPad, it's only been on the market for 2 years. You think about every day people are creating new applications for that. I have a 5-year-old that basically uses the iPad, she knows how to do anything. I have to ask her how to do certain things on it. And but you think about that generation of people that are even in college today that are growing up with these devices. Just the way that they can be used, I think, is going to really take off in the industry, and they're just going to become more and more prevalent. So I don't think it's a fad at all. But so let's, David, why don't you? Mark, why don't you start us off with what you're seeing at Cisco?
Yeah.
I think these statistics really talk to the points that we're making here.
Yeah, it's just some statistics we pulled for this is the internal deployment at Cisco. So we do provide a choice of either whatever PC you want, as long as it's a black Lenovo and it looks about like that. But there's also now, the last about 2 years, we've offered Macs, and that popularity has increased. This what you see up here is all BYOD. Cisco doesn't, for the most part, doesn't supply your smartphones or your tablets. But if you look at the growth of this, and again, this is all the internal numbers for the users. If you look at the growth, like Andy was talking about with the iPhones and the iPads, to go from 2 years, from 0 to almost 10,000 iPads, and these are all, individuals purchased. BlackBerry's not a surprise, coming down, right, 14,000 to 10,000. The other interesting thing, I think, too, is the Android devices, is that even though it got a bit of a slow start, as you look at the growth, you're seeing a much faster growth from an Android platform than you are from the Apple platform. The iOS platform is still growing, but not at the rate. Quick question here: How many Android users for smartphones versus, and then iOS, the iPhones? Right, so it looks like iPhones still, definitely outnumbered, maybe 2 to 1 in here. So we still see that today, but it's shifting. So I got to guess, at least internal to Cisco, and again, maybe not a completely fair representative, kind of a, it's fair to say geeky community, I guess, within the company. Probably we'll see more Android devices than iPhones.
And didn't you say that it sort of goes along the lines of maybe the marketing group tends to have more iOS devices versus
so,
engineers
I think,
have...
I think Android devices tend to be more popular within the engineering community, and I'd say, finance, HR, marketing, they tend to be more of the iPhone users. It's just the way it spins, right? I mean, this happens to be their preference, I think.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show this video that you created also, which
I'll do just a quick
points
so this is,
to some of the things that you're doing at Cisco here.
This is really quick. I think you can see real quick. This is there's no audio on here. This is just my guys. This is just from a video collaboration communication standpoint. So this is running a product on the tablets, because that's what everybody's asking for now, is they want to be able to do video conferencing. And then so it's basically native telepresence into whatever your end device is. So iPhones, iPads, both the large equipment and the small equipment. So from our side, we're seeing both the request internally, almost a demand to say we need it on our mobile devices. So it's both streaming and video conferencing. So it's like video from every direction. I'll talk later too about what we're seeing internally from IT. Is the usage patterns don't quite match the requests. We get a lot of requests, but the amount people actually use it hasn't quite caught up with it. They think they want maybe more than they actually use, but I don't know if you all are seeing that or not, but it's kind of an interesting trend.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about yesterday, too, is that I think these mobile devices, at least for me, tend to be better content consumption devices than creation devices. Like, you're not going to create a PowerPoint on an iPad. It's really hard to do, but being able to view video, certainly participate in video conferences, I think that's one of the reasons why that's a driving application for those devices, because it's a great tool for that. Okay, so David, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing at Coldwell Banker, and you have a little bit of a different perspective because you're the VP of learning, so you're not necessarily doing the technical implementation, but you're really trying to drive it from an application perspective, right?
Right. So at Coldwell Banker, the learning department, which trains its 88,000 agents, we develop what's called the social learning portal. And streaming video, I spoke about this yesterday in a different panel, lends itself very well to this social collaborative learning because folks can do UGC, upload their own content, and whether it's from that or from our own trainers who are creating videos or videos that we buy off the shelf. If we flip forward a couple of slides, let me just see, keep going, one more. There you go. You can see that this is a portal that was built for laptops. So what you're seeing is by including things like the rating, number 1, 2, displaying the view counts, 3, it's not highlighted, but there's a little paperclip attachment to associate other media assets to a video, 4, comments, letting our employees comment, and then 5, creating a taxonomy, but displaying the videos in various ways by rank, sort of like which is the most highly rated, which is the least, and then by author or by subject, create this very engaging, fun environment to play these videos. Now, unlike the, what do you call like the education world, like universities, we don't do a lot of lecture capture. So this is not videos of 45 to 1 hour classes that are being replayed. These are typically 2 to 7 minute videos on very specific topics. So when moving to, we developed this, rolled out extremely successful, but we had made a mistake. We had built this in Flash. So then when the iPad was becoming hotter and hotter, we had to go back and start to redo it in HTML5. So that's what we're in the middle of. That's not quite complete, so I don't have a image of that yet or any kind of demonstration. But it's a little bit complicated because a lot of the interactions, the player controls that you use, I don't need them to look exactly the same, but we need the same functionality. And there is like a lot of extra work with converting over to HTML5. Now that's for iPad, and just like Mark, our agents are independent. Well, our agents are independent contractors, so they bring their own devices. They're all over the place, and a lot do have iPad, and we think they would use a social learning portal like this on an iPad. Well, what we did last year is we brought mobile streaming video over to smartphones, and we supported BlackBerry Droids and iPhones. And people saw it, and they saw this collection of training videos on the phone, and it worked. And they thought, like, this is really, really cool. But then we were noticing the usage, it really wasn't used. And what we're finding out is if folks are going to watch a training video, they're not going to do it on their phone. So the question is, well, then what are we going to use a smartphone device for? So what we're in the middle of now is creating a performance support app. So we scrapped the collection of videos that were on the phone. We spoke to many, many different vendors. And what we're looking at now is if there's a real estate agent who's out in the field, when would they really want to leverage streaming video out in the field? So what we're doing is creating an app for performance support, what we're calling the moment of need. So like a pretty understandable example would be an agent drives up the street and sees a sign that says for sale by owner, which is a very hot lead for someone who represents a real estate brand because you want the owner to go with your brand instead of trying to sell the house themselves. So what we're trying to do is create this app that would list very specific videos, not a whole ton, for these videos that would support them in the moment of need. And then wrapped around that is developing an app with other ways of tracking their own performance and creating something more than a collection of videos, but really building this app that would track their goals for the week, track how many cold calls they're making. So sort of wrapping the streaming video into something a little bit more than just dumping a lot of videos on the phone.
So when you said that they wouldn't watch a training video on their phone, why is that? Is it the screen's too small, it's too long for that, and is there any difference between phones and like tablets?
Yeah, so a tablet, yes. So we're converting our social learning portal over to the tablet, and they like that because folks just like sitting on their couch, or the
Right.
tablet's very convenient. But most folks, and you all, a lot of you, whether you're in your own company or been at larger corporations, you don't really go and do a lot of training. Most folks will sign up for a training course like 1 to 4 times a year, and 2 of those are for probably mandatory ethics or sexual harassment training, right? So what we're trying to do is create more like a culture of learning. The social learning portal is a place where we're hoping folks go in like 3 or 4 times a month to see what other folks who are doing or learning from experts in their own organization. So what we found was that with the phone, that's not the time people are going to say, let me see what everybody else is up to, or let me watch this video. But we feel that by creating an app around performance support and making the training maybe 30 or 40% of what this app is about, it weaves itself in a little bit better, and folks would find it more useful. More like a job aid as opposed to training.
Right. Interesting. Okay. All right, well, let's move on now to Sid. And
All right.
So
I kind of want to just start with the basics. Let me just jump in on this.
go ahead.
So, kind of the evolution of delivering video. I didn't want to assume what people knew about this. So, I'm a network engineer by trade, so this is how I think of the world. You know, it's all about the network. So, some of the challenges we have are, for example, our security department mandated that with wireless devices, if they connect to the network, that they're actually tunneled to the closest internet egress, and then they have to connect to an SSL VPN box, and then they're actually tunneled back. So think about delivering video in that scenario. You're gonna basically double it up on your network, and it becomes incredibly inefficient. You're increasing latency, blah blah blah. You're gonna have a horrible experience, right? So just to begin to talk about mobile devices, we had to look at incorporating something like NAC, because now you have to control all those devices that are going to hit your network. So that's the first hurdle. And then the next would be trying to figure out how you're going to move all that video on demand. So maybe you've got multicast on your network, so you can do live really easily. But what are you going to do with all that VOD? So you can't go back to the origin server, so you got to move it out to the edge. So you need some sort of appliance to cache it at the edge. Then next, again, we got the mobile device coming in. So now you're looking at different video types. So you're going to support an iPad and a laptop and, who knows what. Bring your own devices coming around the corner for our organization. So, question mark. You got any kind of device hitting this appliance. So what I want to do is I want to have something that's going to transmux. You have an H.264 file, and you transmux and containerize it at the edge. Now you don't have to hit your network at all. You trickle it out at night. It becomes a very efficient mechanism for delivering any kind of video to any kind of device. So that's our goal there. We're not quite there yet. We're working on that. You start to move into, okay, that's for people who are on-prem. What happens to people who are traveling or work at home? So again, another challenge. You don't want to have all those people coming in through the internet to grab assets, right? So now what we do is we actually incorporate multicast on our prem, and then we send a unicast stream out to the cloud, and then we split tunnel our SSL VPN, and we allow those users to go directly to the cloud, and it becomes much more efficient and nimble. And then hopefully with VOD, we sync up our on-prem instances with the cloud again, and then we have a seamless environment. Same look and feel whether you're in a brick-and-mortar office or you're in an airport or you're working at home. So this just as it expands out to the cloud-based solution. So some of the highlights I wanted to talk about for us is the things that really impact us are, number one, we're a shop that, we're IT and then there's server, right? And there are two different environments. right? So when I buy something to do encoding or I buy something to work in my video environment, I don't want to buy a server. Because now I have to deal with the whole thing of who owns it, who manages it. I got to deal with maybe an outsourcer who's going to manage that server. So for me, I'm looking for an appliance to make that simple. And that gets tricky. You've got a branded server that says, blah, whoever it is, but it's still a server. So as soon as those server guys find out it's got Windows OS on it, well, now you're back in that whole ball game where they have to patch it and they want to lock it down and they want to do all that stuff to it. So for me, again, I want to see appliances. I'd love to see them on not a Windows platform. So the other important thing is containerizing the video. So we're looking for appliances to sit at the edge and efficiently transmux our video. So that's a really important strategy. We're primarily IE8 in our shop. We just moved to IE8. We were XP still on the desktop. So that's only going to support Flash. So we have to deliver in multiple formats. So again, that containerizing is important. And then distribution of VOD. So again, I need that edge device to house all that VOD so that it doesn't impact the network in transit. And let's see what else. Then there's internal where I control basically the client and I can control the devices to some degree. But then maybe we have customer-facing solutions where it's a whole other ballgame. So for me, and especially with Bring Your Own Device, I'm kind of moving towards supporting anything, whether it's internal or customer-facing, because then again, I don't have hurdles, I don't have roadblocks, and if I build those solutions in the same way, I can save, right? Economies of scale, I can save money, I can save in designing, and down the road when something shifts or changes, I'm more nimble because everything's unified. So, the other thing, video conferencing we touched on. So to me, the room is going to go away. You're going to have a device that you either have at your desk or you travel with, right? So now it becomes really important to think about unified communications and to make sure that video, whether it's conferencing, a two-way video, is going to be unified as well. So what I'm seeing is just unification across the board. You want your broadcast, your video conferencing, your UC, everything. I have electric personality, I guess. You want all that to be unified. So that's my goal.
So you kind of moved away from where the people had to come into the network and then pull the video out to sort of pushing the internet delivery out to the cloud. As a healthcare provider, security is obviously real important for you guys. How did you deal with some of the security aspects of that?
Well, right now we're pushing the vendor to. I'll just say we're using vBrick gear. There's some vBrick people in the room, so. We're asking for SSL out there in the cloud or some kind of encryption. So, there's discussions we can use RTMV, right, Flash. Well, but what do we do for iOS? So we just have to have encryption across the board for all the devices. We have to support that somehow. And for me, I think SSL is the simplest way to do it. But we haven't crossed that. So we don't actually have all of this in production yet because we haven't ironed out all the wrinkles. But it's really coming together. So I feel really encouraged that we have a unified strategy that I think is going to meet my goal, which is that unification. That's no matter where I go, my senior leadership, that's what I always talk about is, let's not pick solutions in the dark. Let's do it all together because, video's like herding cats anyway. So you don't want your HR department picking one product, which they've done, and then my learning department picking another product, which they've done, and then try to bring them together and have to say to them, guys, it's not going to work, Or we have a lot of transcoding to do or something, It's just not practical.
All right. So, Mike, Accordant's been delivering video solutions for many years now, and now with Polycom. What are some of the trends you're seeing from a mobile perspective? The transition kind of from Windows media-based desktop streaming to mobile devices. How does that? What are your customers asking for from that perspective?
Sure, and so as a vendor, we're seeing a very wide cut or diverse cut of demand, and our business and our development and our product road mapping is really all demand driven at this point. We're a pretty mature company, having been around for 10 years. So to David's point, as we originally looked at mobile devices and usability and the ability to be productive and generate value on a mobile device as a content consumer, we really struggled with it because it caused a great deal of compromise, whether you're going to compromise some aspect of the video quality, whether you're going to compromise not having supplemental rich media or interactivity or something. But recently, and this goes to the original poll you asked, Andy, the demand is tremendous, and it seems as though it's here to stay, and I think to the point where the demarcation of mobile, or the definition of mobile, is changing. And the reason it's changing, I believe, is that there's less or no compromise from the consumer perspective. You can actually have, in many ways, a superior experience from the desktop. Maybe it's superior because it's more convenient. Maybe it's superior because the portal environment that you've been authenticated into is richer and more rewarding. Maybe the tracking capabilities are very robust. So, we look at it with skepticism. When we hear about a fad or something we should be chasing, we go, well, we have this many developers, we have this many hours available to us, and we have way too much we want to do. So let's be cynical, let's watch. And this is an area where actually we've invested a tremendous amount of time revamping our entire portal experience to be an HTML5. So to do an entire rewrite of our core product, which is a management system, is, I think, at least from our perspective, a testament to, or I should say, the confidence we have that this is going to be around for a while.
Mm-hmm. And so in your product suite, do you create different profiles for the different mobile devices? Like, if you're going to do video plus PowerPoint, obviously that's going to be really hard to see on a small screen, but that might work okay on the iPad, obviously on PCs and stuff. So
absolutely, and we're really, I would say, gunning towards the tablet experience because it is robust. It emulates what you'd have on the desktop. There's more with the touch and then scrolling through. It's a more enjoyable experience. So that's what we're gearing towards. From a developer perspective, we have to be very, very discriminating because it's not just, hey, here's video and it's going to be on a mobile device. It's, are you a content consumer or are you a publisher? Are you being authenticated within a private environment that is a portal experience that's corporate, or is it a wide open environment? How is that authentication taking place? And yes, we have very specific profiles. We have embedded players for the tablet experience. It still is, as I was talking to my CTO in preparation for this yesterday, just about some of the nuances, there's still a great deal of complexity, and there's still a great deal of desire to migrate towards very uniform standards that don't create really exponential numbers of development decisions and decision trees. So we're used to it. Having been in this industry for 10 years, it's never just easy. One format, one bit rate, one use case. I think the important part, though, is that the demand is driving that type of innovation. So we still hold out hope that we will achieve simplicity and productivity at some point.
Right.
We all share that dream. Yeah. Unification rate.
Are we
Back
closer?
to that. No, I don't know.
All right. Well, that's a good segue into so let's talk about some of the challenges that you have to implement mobile video in the enterprise network. I think in many cases the enterprise is even more challenging than delivering it out to the internet because a lot of the CDN providers have created the functionality to make that relatively seamless. Whereas in the enterprise, in many cases, you sort of have to develop that on your own or work with a provider that provides those solutions. So, one of the biggest challenges I think that we see, and you guys touched on a little bit about the BYOD, is there's a very wide variety of devices that are available now, and the screen sizes are different, the processing power is different, so it makes it very difficult to to target these different devices. So, from your perspectives, I know, David, you can't really choose. The people have their own phones, and you have to make it work with them, right? So
right. So initially last year, when we thought, let's just put all these videos out, people are going to love it on their phone, we supported Droid, iPhone, BlackBerry. This year, as we move into creating this app, to save money, and really because in a sense it's a pilot, a proof of concept, we're just doing it for the iPhone because that saves us a lot of money by just doing it for one device. And our breakup is probably like this room. It's probably like, 45% iPhone, 45% Droid, and probably like 10% BlackBerry. So I thought, well, just pick one, Droid or iPhone, and we just went with iPhone and said, let's just do it. And then we could see the adoption rate, make tweaks to the way this app is going to work, And then when we're all fine, as we move into next year, then we'll start to support more devices.
I just wanted to touch on something that you made me think of, which is service in the cloud. And one thing that we're dealing with is that our management wants to put everything in the cloud, right? Let's just put video in the cloud. And I have to explain over and over why that won't work because, okay, so it'll work with work-at-home people. But what do you do with all those people that are still brick and mortar on your network, right? And I say, okay, we have approximately 30,000 people that are probably in the office on a day-to-day basis. You're going to have all those people going out to the cloud to get video. So they have all these vendors coming in who say, we can stream your content. Just sign on the contract. Video's a service. But they don't think about the consequences to the network. So that's really important to talk about, supporting multicast, how do you get all that stuff to that user who's sitting in, somewhere in the Midwest when your internet pipes are restricted, right? You're going to break business. You're going to break critical business to do that. So I just thought that was important to touch on.
Yeah, because one of the things that a lot of people don't think of is that if video is not like putting email out in the cloud, right? You put your email server out in the cloud, and your email comes, and if it's slowed down, it doesn't really matter. But with video, it's got a big payload, a lot of bandwidth, and it's going out and then coming back in. And if you multiply that by hundreds and thousands of users, then that can really become a big issue, right?
Right. So it's the opposite of the current trend. I mean, we're all about as a service for everything. So video conferencing and even the UC platform, right, where you've got 50,000 desktops with a video-enabled UC client. Well, you have to make it interoperable, and you have to support all that bandwidth. So, again, if you got work at homes, great, stick it out in the cloud. But if you're on-prem, you've got to think about call control, and you've got to think about distribution. And those things are, again, critical to success. And QoS and all those basics, but, that goes without saying.
So, Mark, how about you? I know, Cisco obviously does a ton of video, both from video conferencing as well as streaming.
Yeah.
How did that impact? Have you done any studies on how much more traffic is going over the wireless network now?
Yeah, we definitely do. So, it's interesting because a lot of it is also based on, so I think what users sometimes ask for isn't always exactly how they end up consuming, right? So everybody seems to want, I absolutely want video on my smartphone, I want it on my tablet. What we see is that the videos, the static content, the video on demand, people are using these kind of devices because most, I think, maybe David, like yours, it's a fairly short video. It's 2-3 minutes, maybe whatever the kind of YouTube average is. So we have an internal, internal YouTube, similar to yours, right? You rate videos, all the rest of those things. But for streaming events, there's a lot of people that had requested it to say, I absolutely want to watch a company meeting on a device like this, but so we end up doing some proof of concepts, and we'll put out like an HLS streaming server, and there's not that much usage on it, right? People try it for a few minutes, and then they'll go, okay, it's really small. You're not going to sit for 2 hours, whatever, to watch a live streamed event, or at least our internal customers don't appear to. So what we're trying to do now is figure out what are people really going to use, right? Because I don't want to waste a lot of time and money on just delivering, I want this, and then find out they're really not going to take advantage of it. What we found is that people tend to either they go and attend an event live, or if they're going to watch it live streamed, they're going to sit at a desktop unit. Now they may do it with tablets. So some of this work was done back before tablets got as popular as they are in our company. But what we found is that what they really wanted was more of like the chat features that go along with those streaming sessions. So we have a moderated chat, an unmoderated chat where you can pretty much say whatever you want to, and like a polling, so they'll ask various questions. And what we found is that even people in the live audience wanted to do that too. So they wanted to be in the live audience, but they didn't want to miss out on that chat feature. So we've actually provided those things without providing video, and that seems to have hit at least the sweet spot inside of Cisco for now. Can't guarantee it's going to stay like that. The only downside is now when you look out at the live audience, you have this. So there's a bit of a downside to it because you lose, I think, some of the interaction. We've gotten it from some of the presenters saying, I know what the top of everybody's head looks like, but that's about it. So I think there's some challenges there in terms of how far is it going to go, right? I personally, from what we see, I don't think people are going to consume large amounts of data streaming, whether it's live or static content, off of a device this size. Tablet is your in-between, right? You may get that kind of a push. But I'll say, so from the wireless infrastructure part, yeah, we definitely had to upgrade our wireless infrastructure, right? I mean, okay, we're Cisco, right? So we've got, our networks are overbuilt, some may say. But initially our wireless infrastructure wasn't, so that did take some time and effort to make sure. Our expectation was that it was probably going to be used more than it appears to be today. Is that I got all this requests, and we had this assumption that everybody's going to be walking around with a mobile device consuming video, and they're not. They're still consuming it, but they're stationary. They're not going from access point to access point. They're in a spot where they've got their laptop and they're watching it on there, or they may have an iPad, but they're not moving around with it. So it's mobile, but it's mobile because they can pick it up and walk around. But what we're seeing is that when people are watching, they're pretty much non-mobile.
And Mark, really quick to your point,
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty profound piece of that anecdote is that you had to do extra work to
Yeah.
improve the in-person experience to meet the standard of the online experience.
Yeah.
And I think when you take a very objective view of the value you're providing, that's a good way of looking at it. And it won't always be the case for every use case.
Yep.
But as you roll these things out, maybe in learning there's extreme demand for content and information and extreme hunger. And in other areas it's more passive, and you might have to push harder to get people to consume it. Very interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say it's often the special use cases that'll drive us to create a solution. It's our senior leadership that are traveling and they want to watch a live stream in the airport, or they want to, they're going to be the ones to dictate. You must make this work. So it may only work for 5 people, but we have to support it, and we have to support it anywhere, right? Because they're a very, very important person, and they're going to make it happen, especially if they come up with the money to make it happen. The other thing is, what was I going to touch on? Something else.
Containers.
I love containers. Yeah, we talk about those a lot. Chat and all those features like that. I think it's incredibly important to support chat in some sort of video delivery product. Whether you're able to integrate it into your UC platform, or you're able to integrate a very large, scalable chat client into a video portal, it seems to be very important to the people who want to use it. And for us, if we did like an all-hands-on broadcast, we're supporting 50,000 people, and we not have to deliver video, but we have to include interactive chat and maybe moderator and polls. And so it just gets more and more complicated. And then you add presentation material, which we all have talked about probably ad nauseum. And what I want to see is a dual stream type situation where if the user's on a small phone, they can choose, I'm only going to watch the presentation, or I'm only going to watch the camera. But they have that choice to flip between the streams and see it like a low frame rate presentation stream where they can actually read, fairly small font. Because trying to re-educate our executives in redoing their PowerPoints, we have a template that we use. No matter what we do, we can't get them to change it. So they're always going to use little teeny bullets and little teeny font and graphs that are, make your eyes bleed. And that's just the reality. So.
Okay. So how are you guys dealing with the whole transport mechanism difficulty? So, H.264 has pretty much become the standard in terms of compression, but Apple supports HLS for delivery. You still got Flash with RTMP. There's a lot of talk at the show here about MPEG Dash. How are you guys dealing with that complexity now? Are you doing sort of the live transmuxing of the content, or is there some other mechanism? Sid, why don't you?
Yeah, well, you've heard me container. So I want a standard H.264 file that I can then transmux. That's I think is the simplest way to go. And if someone has a better solution, let me know, because I'd love to simplify it. But again,
so that's an MP4 file.
Yeah, H.264. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of conversations to have around that.
Right.
Baseline, mean, high. We can get into such deep complexity that, of course, my management doesn't know, and they don't care. They're like, I don't care, just make it work. So lowest common denominator, do you go that way? What we do is we deliver several different streams on our multicast, for example. So if you're in a brick-and-mortar office, you can connect to a different stream. Now, of course, we automate that because we don't want someone choosing. We don't want someone at a little bitty office with a T1 going, I'm going to watch the high bandwidth stream and suck down all the bandwidth across that T1, and now we're breaking a critical application. So we automate that as much as possible. And that's done by, whatever your IP is, we determine what the appropriate stream is for you, and we deliver it. So it's going to be the same way with a mobile device. You come in with a mobile device, hopefully it's adaptive, and we're going to tell what your available bandwidth is, what your container should be, and we're going to deliver you the appropriate content.
Mark, what do you guys do at Cisco?
Similar to what Sid does. I think, from our side, I'm all for Dash, right? I think it's great. I guess, the question is Apple going to kill Flash and Dash?
Flash and Dash.
I think without, at least as far as I can tell, without Apple and Google behind Dash, we've got some real struggles, right? I think Microsoft's on board, right? From my own perspective, right? I think it's Dynamic adaptive streaming seems to make the most sense. But I think that as long as HLS is out there, I know Google with Android 3X and above, I guess, supports it. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. So I don't know if this actually provides an answer or just one more to add to the pot say, I think the vision is great and we're all for it, but without a certain set of companies behind it, I think it's going to struggle. And it's from my side, I think it's too bad, right? I think it's a great idea. I think it's the right plan moving forward. It solves some of the problems that we're all talking about, but without a certain segment of companies with thumbs up for it, just one more.
Right. How are you addressing it at Polycom, Mike?
We definitely hear enthusiasm for Dash. I think, as I alluded to, as you get into formats and trying to predict the future, it's there's a lot of hope. So we haven't exactly locked down the roadmap in that regard, and we're talking to people like Wayne who are very enthusiastic, and hoping to make the right decision going forward.
Right.
I just want to say one more thing. I don't think that I can make a bet on what's going to happen. So again, I'm taking this sort of universal approach. And another challenge is in the video conferencing arena. I mean, you have the same problem, right? X doesn't work with Y, and you got all these different companies that have different proprietary protocols that they're using. So my hope is that it's all unified, not just streaming, but video conferencing. We all start to use the same protocols, and it, again, unified. And you've noticed the theme here. It's kind of my mantra, but that will make us all a lot happier.
Okay, so next topic I think is an important one is how are you delivering the content to the mobile devices? Are you building specific apps for the different platforms, or are you using sort of the native browser of the device? And I think there's pros and cons to both. From an app perspective, typically you get some improved functionality, but in an enterprise environment, you then might have to push that app out to 50,000 users. So in native browser, obviously you don't have to push an app out, but sometimes the functionality might be less. Are you guys building apps, or are you just doing browser?
Well, we're more focused in that area for a customer-facing solution because there's a lot more. We've got almost 40 million members, so there's a lot more focus there. Internally, I think we're going to try to use a browser-based solution, but of course, there's lots of challenges there. So right now, internally, we're only supporting iOS, so that makes our world a lot easier. So we've got PCs with IE8, and we've got iOS devices, and we have Macs, a few sprinkled around. So those are my focus. So IE8, Safari, and whatever's going to be on iOS. And that's interesting, right, because you can put different browsers on iOS, but they're all very variable in how they perform with this kind of thing. So I think we're going to try to use a portal, try to keep it web-based. That makes us more nimble, especially as we move towards HTML5. Hopefully we can move in that direction, not have to download plugins and clients and all that sort of thing. So.
What about you, Mark?
Both, right? We never tend to do just one thing. There's a number of apps that have been built. Moving forward, again, it's back to the browsers, right? We've got a number of different platforms. Everybody's brought their own device. We've got Firefox, we've got IE8, we've got Safari, we've got Chrome. Everybody wants to use their own thing. So there's obviously more control over it when you build your own app, but you've got to go down a different path, right, and building a different app for every device out there too. So, again, I don't know how to do it with picking one over the other. I think again, for us, it depends, right? There's some things that we want to do for speed, and we have an event coming up, and we'll just move forward with doing it on a browser. Mm-hmm. So, but some things that we think, especially those that are going to end up, potentially being customer-facing, apps. Certainly with apps, right? You can get past some of the. If you don't go down an app route, you don't have to pay Apple their 30% surtax on the app development. Sell it out on their little site. But I think moving forward for us, I don't think we've decided to say it's exclusively one or the other. It's probably always going to be a combination. It's going to depend on what the application, what the use of it's going to be, whether it's an application or whether it's a browser.
Right. But David, the trial that you're doing with the iPhones, did you build an app for that, or is that browser based?
Right. So initially, when we rolled out some videos last year, it was through a browser, and now we're developing the app. And we did bring in consultants. We're not a technical company to try to understand the pros and cons. And we decided to go with the app And part of it is we felt like the user experience would be better. Another part was by downloading the app, we thought we could incorporate some of the learning content and all those other things we were talking about, this way of tracking your sales productivity through your sales funnel. We felt just like download it once and build in this functionality. The other thing that we're thinking about doing is making the app would be accessible to everybody, including real estate agents from our competitor companies like Remax, Keller Williams, or Century 21. And the thought is to give them a little bit of a taste of what we got, but then when they would have to log in to get more, and we thought it would be serve as a recruiting tool, so to show them the power of the Coldwell Banker brand and the training it gives to its agents. So,
Yeah, that's nice. That's
thanks.
awesome.
Okay, so next topic. So when Flash announced that they were going to no longer support the Flash player on mobile devices, I think that really impacted not just the mobile devices, but also potentially the desktops and the Macs, because one of the things that I would recommend would be, well, use Flash for everything except for iOS devices, and then you really just have to support two things. But now I think this makes life more complicated, and I think people are starting to rethink even doing Flash on the PCs and Macs, because you just want to be able to build one interface in HTML5 and be able to serve all the different devices. Is that kind of the strategy that you guys are working towards?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
Yeah. And
We're trying.
I still think Flash is going to be around for a while, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's effectively dead, I'd say, on the mobile platforms, but on PCs and Macs, I got to believe nothing goes away fast, right? It takes a second to toss it out of the market. It's not a second, but a short period of time, and then it seems like it takes eons before it actually goes away.
right.
Yeah,
So
like we're still.
I just see it being around for quite some time still.
Right. Like we're still IE8. IE8 only. Well, we just got to IE8, so let me say that. And it only supports Flash, so obviously that's going to be around for a while. It could be 5 years before we upgrade our browser on our desktop again, right? So we're Flash. We're going to be Flash for a while. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of enterprises are still on XP, and IE9 doesn't run on XP, I think, so that you can't even do HTML5 on IE if you're running XP machines. And some of the, especially larger enterprises, tend to have slower PC refresh cycles. There's a question?
Yeah, related to Flash, how do you approach measurement now that you don't have a dedicated plugin in the browser to do your metrics? But we use, I'm with Oracle, and we say you can't measure studies. So you have to approach metrics and analytics a different way, right? On mobile devices.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you, if you don't have the Flash player with some of the capabilities it has of tracking, how do you track the video consumption now?
Yeah, so I actually subscribe to that, and in the organizations that we're licensing to, it's true. If you can't measure the business impact, it's probably not getting funded the following year. And we spent a lot of time investing in that area, even though it doesn't have a lot of glamour to it, for folks that are very artistically inclined and so forth. So it starts with authentication and understanding who is coming into the environment, when they're coming into the environment, what they're clicking on, what are they consuming, how are they interacting with it, and being able to capture all that either within the portal environment or from the player or some of the interactions with that player, and then being able to really trisect that data and cut it in any way you want to fully understand the story that you want to tell, whether it's a quality of service story and you want more investment into infrastructure, whether it's a performance story, whether it's a testing and certification story. The business metrics are essential, and I think sometimes when you ask people what they want to do, and they tell you they want to stream video or they want a video conference, they're misleading themselves. What they really want to do is achieve a measurable business objective and have the tools in place to accomplish those and to be able to substantiate that they achieve those goals. And so obviously you need the underlying technology, but I think the way you framed it as the essential quality of the business metrics is absolutely correct.
So I was going to say, I'm going to step beyond that a little bit. Like for me, again, network guy, I want to know what kind of device it was, what the stream type they pulled, what the bandwidth they pulled, Like maybe for some reason the logic in our portal is wrong and we're sending the wrong stream to somebody. We need to know why that broke. Duration, how long do they watch it? And for compliance, maybe they have to watch the whole thing before they get a certificate or something. So all those things need to go up to different groups, right? So there's the learning area, there's corporate compliance, there's all these different areas that want different things from the reporting. So authentication is critical. We tie to LDAP, so we have a record of anybody who authenticates, no matter what device they're on. They have to authenticate. Centralize everything. So, distributed platforms for me just don't work because, again, trying to tie all that reporting back, unless you have a common database, it's very difficult, right, to gather all the statistics in a meaningful way. What I'm finding, too, is that we need better reporting. So a lot of the portal products, they have different strengths, right? So as long as the data is there and I can talk to an API or I can pull those statistics out of it, we're happy, right? But the data's got to be there. You got to have it in one place.
Yeah, I think a lot of the providers in the industry here and a lot of the portal products that people are developing typically doesn't really matter as much what the player is anymore. It's just that the server is able to communicate with the end client and capture those events in order to do the tracking. I heard on some of the other panels that HTML5 is getting much more advanced in that respect.
One of the drags on adoption for HTML5 is the gaps.
Yeah.
Analytics.
Right.
One of many things, yes.
All right, so let's talk about Microsoft with the Windows 8. Is anybody using Windows 8? Is anybody trialing Windows 8? So that's a very small proportion of the crowd, just a couple people. So is Microsoft, is it too little, too late, or are there advantages that that OS brings that might be very attractive in the enterprise? For example, the fact that you can have the same OS that runs on mobile devices as runs on your PC, I think, is something that I've heard that's very attractive. And also, a lot of enterprises are looking to deploy Link on their network, and so I think that the integration between that device and Link is probably going to be superior to some of the other operating systems. What do people? What's the scenario in your organization, Sid? Are you guys looking at Windows 8 at all, or is that just another BYOD thing?
I don't think we found it to be compliant with some of our security requirements, so we're not there yet, and we're not really looking at it in terms of an enterprise mobile device that we would allow. But again, we're going to allow bring your own device. Not that Windows phones are that common out there in the consumer market, but again, I got to support it, right? Link is an interesting thing because they're not supporting video yet, so
right.
that's a big gotcha. So now people are reaching out to other clients, like maybe a Damaka client or something else. So now it becomes, well, how many clients, or maybe they want to use Skype, or now the whole world starts to blow up because you've got all these different protocols. I don't know how many times that I've heard people say, well, can I use FaceTime? I'm like, no, you can't use FaceTime. It's closed, right? We can't bring that into the enterprise. Or if you can, I don't even want to think about it. So Link, and we are also Office 365 in the cloud, which again presents huge obstacles for any kind of integration. I don't know how many times I said, well, can I put a SIP trunk into it? No. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. And Microsoft promises, well, we'll get that worked out for you, and we're going to make Office 365 compliant. Right now it's very proprietary, right? The authentication's different. The video protocols are different. So if anybody's on Office 365, look at it very carefully, because it'll present you with huge challenges for integration, especially call control, things like that. Again, network guy, I want to know what it's doing in my cloud, and I want to be able to control it. And you can't, right? It's just going to go out to that hosted site, and, it's just another complexity in the picture. Right?
What about you, Mike? Are you guys looking to support that?
We absolutely have to. I mean,
You've got a good partnership with Microsoft.
Yeah,
right?
and
Yeah,
I was going to
laugh away.
I was going to laugh about an earlier comment about being on IE8 and sticking with it for 5 years. And there is a difference between buying software and then operationalizing it, which could take years and years and years. So we're trying to hit a moving target. We do have a very deep partnership with Microsoft. It's been very good to us, integrating into both Link and SharePoint. And the reason I bring it up is there is going to be a presumption of adoption for certain types of technologies, whether you're a Cisco shop, whether you're an Oracle shop, whether you're a Microsoft shop. And there is a momentum that brings those operating systems or those applications behind the firewall. And a lot of folks are sort of indoctrinated and have deep preferences, and so we anticipate broad adoption, quite frankly, and are developing to it. I think we have a little bit of time, though, based on one hand being raised.
One other thing I was going to say is, again, I go back to that UC platform for us. We were kind of waffling for a number of years. And I said to senior leadership, I'm like, we really can't make a decision in where we're going to go with video, especially two-way video, until we know what the UC platform is, because we have to integrate. So we have a big Cisco presence. We have Cisco telepresence. We've got Tamberg. We've got all that stuff. Then we decided to go Link, right? So now we have these two worlds. It's funny. I've been talking to Polycom a lot, thanks to Cisco, because
separated it.
Yeah, right. Because I love the fact that Polycom is doing as much ubiquity across the two-way video environment as they can, right? They're going to support they can support TIP, they can support Link, they can support the Tamberg stuff, whatever you want to throw on there. And they have a lot of endpoints that register natively to Link. Not to Office 365 yet, but that's hopefully coming. So what I want to design is an environment where if they rip out the UC platform and they replace it, I don't have to redesign everything else. But that's a super challenge, and that's something I like. Actually, keeps me up at night because I'm like, well, what if my CEO meets with John Chambers, which they actually meet quite a lot, and they decide, okay, we're going to do a deal, and because of that deal, now we're going to move to Cisco for UC. Well, that has a huge impact on my strategy across the board, right? So that's a difficult proposition. So if you know where you're going with enterprise voice and you're going to go VoIP and you know where you're going to UC, I say that's half the battle. Now you can build on top of that, but just make sure your management understands that's not interchangeable, and they don't understand that. You can't just rip it out and replace it with something else because the consequences ripple across the environment.
That usually doesn't stop them.
I know, but I try. I understand. Oftentimes there's not logic to things, which confounds people like me. But.
Yeah, so I think the point that Sid's making is that while this show is streaming media focused, really in an enterprise environment, you really have to start looking at the bigger picture and thinking about your video conferencing and your unified communications and your streaming all together, because eventually they're going to come together, and you need to kind of create a strategy in order to do that. So we have a few more minutes here for questions. I think we kind of covered these other topics sort of through the course of the discussion, so I wanted to open it up to the crowd and see if there's any questions from the crowd.
Does any of you use the kind of podcast distribution model, like an RSS feed or iTunes?
I don't want to use podcasts because I don't want them to walk away with it.
Yeah, so the
I
question
want to
was.
control. Oh, sorry.
The question was, does anybody use podcast type distribution or RSS feeds?
Yeah, I saw that on your portal, and it's interesting for us because I don't want you to have that on your device. I want to control it, right? Because you can post it on YouTube, you can put it anywhere. We have corporate sensitive data that we can't have somebody posted on YouTube. So we basically allow you to watch it. We allow you to basically view it whenever you want on VOD or live, but you can't walk away with it. You can't store it on your device. Now, of course, they're capture devices and blah, 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 but, you can't get insane about it. You just, so it's funny because almost everybody says podcast. They're so familiar with that term. And again, I say, well, podcast means you actually download it, you have it on your device. We're not going to support that. So, sorry, you had a...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our RSS feeds or links out to ones we feel are public anyway, but we do have our own, and it's a little tricky. I mean, we do want to give some teasers out to our competition, but we don't want to give the cow away with the milk. The flip side is, with today's tools like Snagit and things like that, if someone wants to capture a video and save it, they can do it. So, it's kind of like, I mean, you want to do what you want to do, and people stick with it. But for the most part, we haven't seen a lot of our enterprise proprietary content, get out there. So we're okay where we are right now.
Yeah, I think in most cases, I think it's sort of a mixture of how important is it to protect this content. Should I allow the user to download it so they can watch it on the airplane or whatever? And you just have to make those trade-offs. And I think most of the products out in the market have the capability to allow you to download or or not. And I think from the DRM perspective, I don't even. Once we figure out the transport stuff, maybe we'll eventually the industry will get around to figuring out DRM. But it just adds such an incredible layer of complexity. I wouldn't even recommend going there at this point.
I was curious if anybody. We're just getting into the mobile streaming aspects, and I was wondering if anybody's had any experience, since these are mobile devices, and we're not expecting the person necessarily to be sitting watching the video. What happens jumping between 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi networks to the video? And is there any way to detect what type of network they're on so we can pre-cache the video or whatever to ease the transition? Because I assume it's going to have to reconnect again, switching to a different network. And I haven't actually seen the switch between the networks. Has anybody had any experience with that while watching Seamless?
Yeah, so the question is, when you're moving from, for example, Wi-Fi network to a 3G network, how does that impact the video, and are there any tools to make that a seamless process?
From our side, we really just test between access point to access point. Haven't done an awful lot with respect to going from Wi-Fi to either 3G or 4G. So from our side, we say if you have problems with it, don't do it, at least right now. Even access point to access point was a bit to make sure that we felt it was fairly seamless. But again, some of that I feel like it was sort of a wasted effort because we don't really see that behavior in the company that much. I don't know, maybe you all do, but we don't. It's not awful people seem to walk around with it.
We do, of course, against our executives or walking through the airport. I mean, our executives are super creative. I give them that because they really challenge us, right? So, a lot of times the video will just stop, or maybe they'll requeue, or, maybe you have to start it over. So there is some frustration on that side with that technology. I again think adaptive streaming is going to really help that. But, there's only so much we can control. And if they're going to be in a place with poor reception or, moving in a big city, or in a car, good example. You have to educate them in the fact that there are limitations to technology today. And I think that education is really important. What I find with video, it's very interesting. Some people have super high expectations around video. They want it to look exactly like their HD TV at home. And some people are much more tolerant. Like, okay, it's going to have the same kind of problems. Like, I lost a phone call. Okay, I just got to start over. But it's super varying. And again, if I have an executive leader that expects it to be perfect, I want to educate them and say, okay, we're working towards that, but you're going to have these challenges that are outside our control. So that's how we handle that.
Yeah, and I think people are a little bit, more forgiving with the mobile devices because your phone still drops calls, even though the mobile phone industry's been around for 30 years now or however long it is. So, people are a little bit more tolerant, I think, to knowing that you might hit a bad spot or you might have a connectivity problem and you just, press play again.
Ooh, and it depends if it's live or VOD, right? If it's live, maybe we give them an audio dial-in to back it up, right? So, okay, I lost the live feed, but I can dial into this audio bridge. So I think you guys mentioned that in your seminar where you did the audio dial-up, and I was like, yeah, that's critical because you've always got that fallback for that live conference, And maybe you even have a live meeting up with the content on there. So they at least, if they can't get the video, they can at least get the content. So you have all these stages until we get out of all these technological challenges, which I'm sure we'll always have. You got to have all these sort of older fallback, backdoor kind of things going on. So, I thought that was great that you guys mentioned that.
Last question.
For support over 3G and 4G, is there any hurdle you're putting in place where when you release this as the company, suddenly the cell phone bill doesn't go up a couple $1 million that month?
So the question is, if people are going to be watching a lot of video over the 3G or 4G, what's that going to do to their bandwidth bill?
Cool. Two things. Bring your own device. You pay for it. Okay, so that's really an interesting move for our company. The other thing is we're putting in wireless and we're putting in NAC. So I go back to that thing where we were talking about the tunneling, right? We got to change that. We have to put in NAC across the board. NAC is, wireless authentication in case anybody's. But NAC does a lot of stuff, right? It can look in the client. It can look to see if it's safe, if it's got the right software on it. So NAC is pretty sophisticated in terms of looking at a device and deciding whether you're going to allow it on the network, and maybe you only put them on a guest network. So there's a lot of sophistication there. So, but bring your own device is awesome because it gets you around a lot of that. We don't have to pay the bill anymore.
Well, our agents are independent, but the managers, especially of our company-owned offices are employees of our company, and our policy is they get some reimbursement for their phone, but it's capped. So it's not really going to, most people hit that cap anyway. So.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have. I think the panelists will stick around for a few more minutes if anybody wants to come up and ask any additional questions. Thank you very much for coming.